The account is not yours. Your daughter opened it, your name went on it 11 years ago so somebody could reach her money if she ended up in hospital. You have never held a card for it. You could not tell anybody which branch it is at. And there is a rule sitting in a government manual that says every dollar in that account belongs to you. I made a video about that rule a few days ago. Nearly 200,000 of you watched it. And what came back in the comments was not what I expected. It was hundreds of people asking me the same handful of questions over and over, and almost none of them were about the rule I had explained. They were about the situations I had not. I am the person responsible for a bank account for a company I work for. Does that count? I am the treasurer for my church. Does that count? I am the signer on my homeowners association account. Does that count? I hold accounts for my 3 grandchildren. Do those count? My name is on my mother's account, and she is not on any government program at all. Does that count? And underneath all of it, asked probably 500 times in different words, the one question I should have answered in the first 30 seconds, rather than 8 minutes in. Does this reach my regular Social Security check, or only the needs-based one? So I am answering all of it today, every one of those. And I am starting with the last question, right now, before anything else, because a great many of you spent an entire video frightened when you never needed to be. If you receive a regular Social Security retirement benefit on your own work record or disability insurance on your own record, there is no resource limit on those programs. None. There never has been. You can have $100,000 in the bank and it does not affect your payment by a single cent. And no bank search is being run against your accounts to check. That is the whole answer. If that is you, you can stop worrying about the balance in your account entirely. This reaches one program. Supplemental Security Income, the needs-based one with the $2,000 limit. And I am going to be precise all the way through about who each piece touches. But do not close the video if that is not you. And I will tell you exactly why in a moment. Because there are 2 reasons that are genuinely worth your time, and neither of them is me trying to keep you here. So, here is what this video is. 1. The 5 situations you asked me about. The business account, the church, the association, the grandchildren's accounts, and the parent who is not on any program. Everyone answered specifically. 2. What actually happens when the money is genuinely not yours, which is the situation almost every single person who wrote to me was in. 3. The 3 questions that came up most often about money arriving from somewhere else. An inheritance, a lawsuit settlement, an insurance payout on a totaled car. All 3 of those were asked repeatedly, and all 3 have different answers. 4. Why September specifically, and what is actually different about this month rather than last month. And I want to say something to the people who wrote in angry, because a lot of you did, and some of you were right. Several of you told me I should have said the word SSI in the first minute instead of the 8th. You were correct. I have done that today. That is what the comments are for, and I read every one of them. My name is Kevin. I read the rules so you do not have to. Every week I go looking for the thing that quietly decides what happens to your money, and I bring it here before it costs you anything. If that sounds useful, subscribe and turn on the bell, because the third part of this video covers a piece of money that is protected for exactly 9 months, and then stops being protected, and almost nobody knows the clock is running. Let me start with the 2 reasons to stay if you are on regular Social Security. The first is simply that a great many of you are one step away from somebody this reaches. A brother, a grown child with a disability, a neighbor you drive to appointments, somebody at your church, and nobody is going to sit down and explain any of this to them. Because the people it reaches are, almost by definition, the people with the least access to good information. The second is more specific, and it came directly out of your comments. An enormous number of you told me that your name is on somebody else's account, or somebody else's name is on yours, purely as a convenience, and you had never once considered what that arrangement actually means legally. That is worth knowing regardless of which program anybody is on, because a joint account creates exposure that has nothing to do with Social Security at all. If the other person on that account is sued, divorces, owes taxes, or has a creditor come after them, the money in a joint account can be reachable, because legally it belongs to both of you. So the lesson underneath this whole subject is broader than one government program. Putting your name on somebody's account, or theirs on yours, is a legal act with consequences most families never think through. And there are better tools for the job, which I will come back to at the end. Now, the 5 situations you asked about. The first, and this one came up more than any other. I am a signer on a business account as an officer of the company, and I cannot personally withdraw the funds. Here is the principle that answers this one and several others. What the rules actually measure is availability. Can you, personally, walk in and take that money out for your own use? If the answer is genuinely no, and you can demonstrate it, that money is not a resource belonging to you. A corporate account where you are an authorized signer acting on behalf of the company, where the funds belong to the business, where you have no personal ownership interest, and where taking money for personal use would be theft, is not your resource. It can appear in a search, because a search matches names and numbers. But appearing in a search and counting against you are two entirely different things. The second, I am the treasurer for my church. Same principle, same answer. You are handling funds belonging to an organization in a fiduciary role. You have no personal claim on them. That is not your money, and the rules do not treat it as your money. The third, I am the signer on my homeowners association account. Same again. Association funds belong to the association. The fourth, I hold custodial accounts for my grandchildren in their names with their social security numbers. This one has a slightly different answer, and it is a better one. A custodial account where the money legally belongs to the child, and the child's social security number is on it, is the child's resource, not yours. You are the custodian. You manage it. You cannot spend it on yourself. Under the law creating those accounts, that money is irrevocably the child's. And the fifth, which was asked in about 100 different ways. My name is on my mother's account, and my mother is not on any government program. Then nothing in this subject touches either of you at all. The rule only operates when somebody is applying for or receiving the needs-based program. If neither person on the account is in that situation, there is no search and no calculation. Now here is the part that connects all 5 of those answers, and it is the part that actually matters. In every one of those situations, you are probably fine. And in every one of those situations, you have to be able to prove it. That is the entire difference between a 5-minute conversation and a 5-month problem. Let me tell you about Merrilee. Merrilee is 72. She receives the needs-based payment, and for 9 years, she has been the treasurer of a small congregation of about 40 people. The account has, on a good year, $4,000 or $5,000 in it. Building fund, flowers, the heating oil, the fund they use to help members who are struggling. Her name is on it, because somebody's name had to be on it, and she was the one who volunteered when the last treasurer moved away. Not $1 of that money is hers. Everybody in that congregation knows it. The minister knows it. The bank clerk who has known her for 20 years knows it. None of those people work at the Social Security Administration. What exists on paper is an account with her name attached and $4,000 in it. What does not exist on paper is anything at all explaining why that is fine. And Merrilee is not doing anything wrong. She is doing a favor for her church that somebody had to do. She simply has never had a reason to imagine that a kindness she performs on the second Sunday of every month is sitting in a government computer looking exactly like her own savings. That is the whole reason the Quiet Rules exists. Plain English, printed large enough to read without hunting for your glasses, on the things that quietly decide what happens to your money, what counts, what does not, and the exact words to write down so that money which was never yours does not have to be argued about later. So that nobody in your family finds out how a rule works from a letter. It is at kevinexplains.shop. The link is in the description below and in the pinned comment at the top. And if you are watching this on a television right now, there is a code on the screen you can point your phone camera at. 7-day guarantee. Always. If it does not hand you something you did not have before, you send it back. So here is a question worth sitting with. If somebody asked you tomorrow to prove that money is not yours, what would you actually hand them? Now, part 2. What to do when the money is genuinely not yours, which is where almost every one of you actually is. The rule works like this, and it is important that you understand it is not a verdict. When an account has your name on it alongside somebody else, the starting position is that the whole balance is available to you. Not half, all of it. The reasoning is that a joint owner can walk into a branch and withdraw the lot, so the money is reachable, and reachability is what is being measured. That is a presumption. And a presumption is something you are allowed to argue against. If you can show that you did not put the money in and that it is not really yours, it comes out of your resources. And when that argument succeeds, it applies backwards as well as forwards, not only from the day you made it. So what actually wins that argument? 4 things, and you can assemble all of them in an afternoon. Bank statements showing where the deposits came from. If every deposit into that church account comes from collection plates and member contributions, that is the story told in the bank's own records, rather than in your words. Statements showing you never took money out for yourself. The absence of withdrawals is powerful evidence, and it sits in the same documents. A written statement from whoever the money actually belongs to. Not a lawyer's letter, a plain page. Who put the money in, why your name was added, on what date, and confirmation that you have never taken a penny of it for yourself, signed and dated by them. And best of all, a corrected signature card from the bank, showing your name removed entirely. That last one is the real answer for most people. And I want to be direct about it. If your name is on somebody's account purely for convenience, and there is any chance you will ever need this program, get your name off it. It is a 15-minute conversation at a branch. Arguing afterward is a fight you can win, and it is a fight you never needed to have. And here's the piece I want to say plainly, because it is uncomfortable, and it is the most important sentence in this section. Write the statement now, not when it is asked for. The person who can explain that arrangement is a person. People become unwell. People die. A statement signed by your brother this month settles the question permanently. A statement nobody is alive to sign next year does not exist. Merrilee's congregation has a minister and a board. Any one of them could sign a page confirming that account is the church's money. Today, in about 4 minutes. If she waits until somebody asks her, she may be trying to reconstruct 9 years of history from a bank that has merged twice. Now, for the alternatives, because several of you asked what you are supposed to do instead if you cannot put your name on an account. There are 3, and they are all better than joint ownership for this purpose. A payable on death designation. The person keeps sole ownership while alive and names you to receive whatever is left afterward. You have no access and no exposure while they are living, and it passes to you without going through the courts. A convenient signer arrangement. Some banks offer this specifically. You can sign checks and manage the account on somebody's behalf without being an owner of the funds. And a power of attorney. With one enormous caveat I have covered before on this channel. A power of attorney generally works with a bank. It does not on its own give anybody authority over Social Security payments, because that agency runs on its own separate process. So use it for the bank and understand it does not cover everything. Any one of those 3 does the job people are actually trying to do, without creating the problem this video is about. Now, part 3. And these were the 3 questions asked most often after the scope question. Money arriving from somewhere else. The first. An inheritance. Inherited money is not treated kindly here, and I am not going to soften it. When you inherit money, it counts as income in the month you receive it, and whatever is still sitting there after that becomes a resource. So a modest inheritance can push somebody over the limit and end their payment for as long as it keeps them over. And here's the trap that catches the most people. You cannot solve this by refusing the inheritance or giving it away. Refusing an inheritance you are entitled to is treated as transferring a resource. And transferring resources to qualify carries its own penalty period. So the instinct that most people have, which is to hand it straight to a child, creates a problem considerably worse than the one it solves. What you can do is spend it on your own genuine needs. Paying off debt. Repairs to the house you live in. A vehicle, since one vehicle is excluded. Medical or dental work. Setting up a properly designated burial fund. Those are your own money going to your own life, and they are exactly what the rules anticipate. And there is one more option worth naming for the right person. If the disability began before a certain age, an ABLE account can hold a substantial sum entirely outside the resource test. Several of you mentioned in the comments that the qualifying age changed this year, and if that describes somebody in your family, that is worth a specific conversation with somebody who knows the current figure. The second, a lawsuit settlement. This was asked repeatedly, usually by somebody who was hit by a driver or hurt at work, and who feels, correctly, that this money is compensation rather than a windfall. Here is the honest answer. Most of the time, it is counted the same way. Income in the month you receive it, resource afterward. But the composition of the settlement matters enormously, and this is where a great many people lose money they did not have to lose. A settlement is frequently made up of several parts. Compensation for the injury itself. Reimbursement for medical expenses already paid. Lost wages. Pain and suffering. Those parts can be treated differently, and how the settlement agreement itself is written can change the outcome substantially. Which means the moment to get advice is before the settlement is finalized, not after the check clears. Once it is written and signed, the structure is fixed. If you are anywhere in that process right now, tell your lawyer you received this benefit. Say it explicitly, today, because a lawyer who does not know will not structure around something they were never told about. The third, An insurance payout on a car that was totaled. This one has a genuinely good answer, and it made me glad somebody asked. One vehicle is excluded from the resource test entirely, regardless of what it is worth, if it is used for transportation by you or somebody in your household. So the car itself was never counting against you. When it is totaled and the insurance pays out, that money is replacing an excluded resource. And money received to replace or repair an excluded resource is generally itself excluded for a period of time while you use it for that purpose. So the practical answer is straightforward. Use that money to replace the vehicle, and do it reasonably promptly, rather than letting it sit in an account for a year. Keep the paperwork showing what it was and what you did with it. Handled that way, it does not become a problem. And there was a fourth question in this same category that I want to answer because several of you asked it, and it is not about accounts at all. A number of you wrote that you live with a son or a daughter, or that a roommate hands you money for their share of the rent, which you then pay to the landlord. And you wanted to know whether that money is yours. Two separate answers there, and they matter. Money that passes through your hands to pay somebody else's share of a bill is not income to you. You are a conduit. If your roommate gives you their half of the rent and you write one check to the landlord, that is their money passing through, and the way to keep it clean is exactly what you would expect. Do not let it sit. Pay the bill when the money arrives and keep a simple record showing what came in and what went straight out. But there is a different rule that catches people living with family, and it has nothing to do with bank accounts. It is about food and housing provided to you without you paying for it. If somebody gives you a place to live and meals, and you contribute nothing toward them, your payment can be reduced by up to roughly a third. That surprises people badly. Somebody moves in with a daughter to save money and finds the payment goes down. It is not a penalty, and nobody is being punished. The program is designed around what it costs you to live, and if your housing and food are being covered, the calculation changes. The practical response is that if you can contribute a fair share toward household expenses, and you have a simple written arrangement showing what you pay, the situation looks very different from one where you pay nothing. If your living arrangement has changed recently, that is worth asking about specifically, by name, before it turns up on its own. Let me tell you about Odell. Odell is 68, and his car was hit by somebody running a red light. Nobody was hurt. The car was 14 years old, and the insurance paid him about $4,000. He put it in his savings account and did nothing with it for 5 months, because he was still shaken, and because he had been getting rides from his son, and because he kept meaning to go and look at cars and never quite did. By the time he was ready, the money had been sitting in a countable account across multiple first days of multiple months. Nobody stole anything from him. He was not cheating. He was a man who had just been in an accident and was moving slowly, and the calendar did not care why he was moving slowly. That is exactly the gap this guide closes. Not to make anybody an expert in the regulations, to put the whole rule in one place, in plain language, including the clocks that are running while a person is simply getting on with their life, so that nobody loses a payment over a delay that nothing in the world told them was expensive. Same place, Kevin Explains .shop. Link in the description and in the pinned comment at the top, and the code on your screen if you are watching this on the television. 7-day guarantee, no argument. A man 5 months out from an accident, discovering that thinking it over had a price attached. Now, part 4. Why September? And I want to answer this honestly rather than manufacturing urgency, because several of you asked in the comments what was supposed to be special about the date. 3 real things. The first is the enforcement expansion itself, which is the subject of the previous video. The zero-tolerance approach to financial searches was extended in stages, first to people 65 and older last August, and then expanded again this April, which means this autumn is the first stretch where the full expanded process is running on essentially every new claim, every reopened claim, and every appeal that grants eligibility. It is not a date on a calendar. It is when the machinery finished being switched on. The second is redetermination season. The agency reviews continuing eligibility on a rolling schedule, and the autumn and winter months carry a heavy volume of those reviews. The notices go out, and the notices are the moment when everything in this video stops being theoretical for somebody. And the third is the one I would actually build a calendar around. Everything I have described in this video takes time to assemble, and no time at all to need. Getting your name off an account takes 15 minutes. If you do it before somebody asks. Getting a statement signed by the person whose money it is takes 4 minutes, if that person is well and available. Reconstructing 9 years of bank records from an institution that has merged twice takes months, if you start after the letter arrives. So September is not a deadline. It is the last comfortable moment before the season when these things get asked about. That is the honest version, and I would rather give you that than invent a date. And since redeterminations came up, let me tell you what to actually do when one of those notices arrives, because several of you described exactly the wrong instinct in the comments, and it costs people badly. A redetermination is a review of continuing eligibility. It is not an accusation. It is not an investigation. It is routine. It happens to everybody on a rolling basis. And receiving one does not mean anybody suspects you of anything. It will ask about your income, your resources, and your living arrangements. And it will have a deadline on it. Here is the single most damaging thing anybody does with one. And it is not lying, and it is not hiding anything. It is silence. Somebody reads the notice, understands most of it, gets stuck on one question they cannot answer, and decides to deal with it at the weekend. Then the weekend passes, and the notice moves from the table to a shelf, and from the shelf to a drawer, and a question that could have been answered in one sentence becomes a file with no response in it. The consequence of not responding is worse than almost any answer you could have given. Not responding can suspend a payment on its own, entirely separately from whatever the answer would have been. So the instruction is simple. Answer it the week it arrives, even if all you can say is that you are looking into one item. Telephone them and say you have received the notice, you are working on one question, and here is what you can confirm today. That single call keeps a file open and moving, and keep a copy of everything you send, every page, with the date. If a question comes back a year later about what you reported, the person with their own copy is in a completely different position from the person relying on memory. Let me tell you about Verlie. Verlie is 79, and she is the person a lot of you described in the comments without realizing it. She has a joint account with her son. Her name went on it after her husband died because her son wanted to make sure the bills got paid if she was ever unwell. Her son puts money in it. She does not. She also has a very small account at a credit union from 1984 that she genuinely forgot existed until her granddaughter found a statement in a drawer, $11 in it, and she has $1,500 set aside for her funeral, sitting in her ordinary checking account, mixed in with everything else. Every single one of those three things has a clean answer. The joint account can be documented or her name removed. The credit union account with $11 in it is not going to move any calculation by a hair. And the burial fund stops counting entirely the moment it is moved into its own separate account and identified as what it is. 3 afternoons of work, possibly 1, and she has done none of it. Not out of carelessness, but because nobody in her life has ever once told her that any of it mattered. Now let me give you my honest opinion, which is only that, and you are welcome to disagree with me in the comments, as many of you already have. Reading several hundred of your comments changed what I think about this subject, and I want to tell you how. Before, I would have said the problem is that the resource limit has not moved since 1989. That is still true. $2,000 for one person, $3,000 for a couple, unchanged for 37 years, while every other figure in the entire system adjusts annually. Indexed properly, it would sit above 5,000 today. But that is not actually what was in your comments. What was in your comments was confusion. Hundreds of people who could not tell whether a rule applied to them at all. People frightened about their retirement check over a rule that has never touched retirement checks. People who have been doing volunteer bookkeeping for a church for a decade with no idea whether it was a problem. And that is a different failure from an outdated number. That is a communication failure. And it is the one that does the most damage day to day. Because a person who is frightened of a rule that does not apply to them makes worse decisions than a person who understands a rule that does. So my objection has shifted. I still think the limit is indefensibly old. But the thing I would fix first is that not one person in this situation ever receives a plain page explaining what counts, what does not, and what to do if money in an account is not theirs. The rules are published. They are correct. They are written for administrators, rather than for a 79-year-old woman with a shoebox. And that gap is not going to be closed by the agency. So it gets closed by daughters and granddaughters and neighbors and people who watch videos like this one and then go and tell somebody. One more thing before the checklist, and it came straight out of your comments too. A number of you wrote that anything from Social Security should only ever come by post, and that you ignore texts and emails entirely. You are right, and I want to back you up on that publicly. Every time a rule like this gets attention, a scam attaches to it within days. Somebody telephones claiming to be a verification specialist, or a benefits compliance officer, or from some federal account review service. They explain that because of the new bank rule, your accounts need to be verified or pre-cleared, and that they can handle it for you or protect your accounts from the search for a payment. Here is the sentence that ends it every time. There is no fee, no service, and no third party anywhere that can shield your accounts from official verification or handle it on your behalf. The search is run by the agency directly. Nobody can opt you out, pre-clear you, or protect you for money. And what they are actually after is not the fee. It is your social security number, or your account number, or a code read out loud over the telephone. The fee is the story. The number is the point. That agency will not telephone you out of nowhere asking you to confirm your social security number or your bank details to comply with a new rule. They already have your number. When something needs verifying, it comes through your application, your redetermination paperwork, and written notices. So if that call comes, put the phone down. Then look the number up yourself and ring them if you have a real question. Never use the number the caller gave you, because in a great many of these, the number is theirs. All right, here is your list. 5 things. 1. If you receive only regular Social Security retirement or disability insurance on your own record, none of this applies to your accounts. Stop worrying about your balance. 2. Write down every account with your name on it anywhere, including accounts belonging to other people, businesses, churches, associations, and grandchildren. 3. For every account where the money is not yours, either get your name removed or get a signed page from the actual owner explaining the arrangement this month while they can sign it. 4. If you have money set aside for a funeral, move it into its own separate account and identify it as a burial fund. Up to $1,500 stops counting the moment you do. 5. If money is coming, an inheritance, a settlement, an insurance payout, get advice before it arrives rather than after. Every one of those has a different answer, and the answer changes depending on how it is handled on the way in. And if your own situation is tangled, if you are looking at an account and cannot work out whether it counts against you, write to me. The address is on your screen and in the description below, and I read every one that comes in. I read the last few hundred, which is why this video exists. One last thing before you go. Merrilee has been counting collection money on the second Sunday of every month for 9 years, and there is not one page anywhere that says it is not hers. Odell spent 5 months thinking about a car and found out that thinking had a price. And Verlie has 3 separate things that would each take an afternoon to fix, and has done none of them because nobody ever told her they mattered. None of the 3 did anything a reasonable person would not have done. Not one was breaking a rule. Every one of them was operating on a picture nobody had ever corrected. So go and correct yours this week. While nothing is wrong, find out whose accounts your name is on. Get the page signed while the person can sign it. And if somebody in your family is doing the books for a church, or holding an account for a grandchild, or minding a parent's money, go and ask them today whether anybody has ever explained any of this to them. I am Kevin. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to check the quiet rules at kevinexplains.shop.